Involved with public policy for more than, 2 decades now, and one of my observations has been that this area is pretty much dominated by lawyers. If you go to a discussion on the privacy bill, 80% of the audience will be lawyers. So, but Kailash has been the rare person who has been, very actively interested in driving public policy conversations. So let me just, without further ado, just straight away come to Kailash. And why do you think that engineers should be so interested in technology and public policy?
I think my thoughts really here are irrelevant, and I speak from a perspective of inevitability. I think the last 20 years we've had, almost 2 decades, we've had the opportunity to do unfettered, unbounded innovation. Anybody could build anything sitting out of their bedrooms or college dorms and launch technology companies, services. We never really had regulations that caught onto the minutiae of technology, how it's built, how it's deployed, how it's given out. But over the last few years, that has been changing rapidly, drastically. And it really started out in heavily regulated industries like finance and whatnot. But increasingly, if you paid attention, the data privacy bills that have been pulled back, and it's come out again, twice, 2 drafts, it's getting to a point where stuff that engineers like, care about, etc., your passion, spirit for tinkering with FOSS, unfettered, open innovation and tinkering, everything will become increasingly legislative. Even a 12-year-old learning to tinker, if they want to publish an app, publish a piece of software, they will probably be in a position where they'll be forced into a position where they'll have to think about policy, legality, etc. And that's never been the case. So I think it's inevitable, and it's extremely important that engineers at least become aware of what's happening out there. And we have this Digital India Act that is going to come out very soon. I think the consultations start this week. So we've only had a very loose framework called the IT Act, 20-year-old framework. It's going to be replaced, and it's going to be an omnibus bill that affects pretty much everything about internet and technology and services and software that we all know of. It's going to affect everyone. So it's inevitable and absolutely essential that we as technologists pay attention. So that's my view. It's inevitable. We need to talk about it.
Let me come to Rushabh. Typically you're a contrarian, so let us hear what you have to say.
So my view on this, right? I mean, firstly, I don't think that the ability to tinker will drastically reduce. I mean, there is obviously, what is really happening is not just that policymakers are waking up, right? It is also that technology has now accelerated to a point where it's dominating society much beyond just, simple applications to help you, right? This is not just the mixie in your kitchen that, just going to, grind your vegetables, right? This is like way more pervasive, connected, and, with internet. And it's not only the dominance of governments, but also big tech, right? I mean, large technology companies today know more about us. Companies like Google, Meta, and Amazon, right? I mean, they know so much more about us that policy seems to be a very small battle to fight. I mean, the real battle out there is really the dominance of technology in all aspects of our lives. And, the kind of, again, I mean, this is something we are still grappling with at so many levels.
So, so my perspective as a public policy person is that, there's that saying in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think today engineers are in a position of tremendous power. If you look at, say, the apps that you build, etc., some of these could, look at ChatGPT, for example, reaching 1 million users in 5 days. And there are so many assumptions that are embedded within that. And just one example of it, I had met this professor of MIT called Ken Keniston, and he said, IT has got values and culture embedded within it. And it's something that was not very obvious to me when I first heard him. And I thought he's talking bullshit. But he said when he went to, say, South America, for example, the people there asked him, why is it that, you have one person on one computer? We are a community-driven society. So what you are doing is basically imposing Silicon Valley's individualistic culture on, a communal society like ours. So the other example is that in the early days of the ASCII code, there were some 37 different codes for exchanging data. Then there was something called the American Standard Code for Information Interchange. And the problem with that is that languages like Urdu, which are written the other direction, could not be accommodated within ASCII. Then you had Unicode. So everything that we do in IT has something or the other social impact. And we have to be cognizant of that impact, and we have to kind of be aware of it and work around that. The other reason I would say is that, again, I'll just give an example of, during the discussion around the privacy bill in Delhi, I was part of a session, and 80% of the discussants there were lawyers. And I have friends who are both lawyers and engineers, and I'm neither. I'm a BCom graduate. So I can criticize both impartially. So the thing is, what I've seen with lawyers is that you give them a document, they are like, it's like a pack of wolves tearing apart every micro clause, and every comma is argued and debated. But lawyers, the mindset is that of their job is to protect a company's interest or an organization's interest. So they have a defensive mentality, whereas software developers have a builder's mentality. And today, 80% of the people in public policy in India are lawyers. And there is a downside effect to that. We need more technology people involved in public policy for that reason. We need more builders to counteract the overweighing influence of the downside protection mindset of lawyers. So yeah.
I'd like to add one more thing. To what Rushabh said, he's absolutely right. The thing is that a lot of these policy conversations, a lot of tech policies devised by policymakers are aimed at monopolies and really large, tech organizations, big tech, and rightly so. But my point is that you cannot it's very difficult to create separate formulations only for big tech, medium tech, low tech, etc. So all of these policies tend to be overarching, over-encompassing, trying to come out with a single silver bullet solution that will rein in the big tech. And also, that's not possible. That's why nuances typically get missed out, because these policies are always aimed at really large players. But that is why it's important. Although it's aimed at someone else, it affects everyone. And like Venki said, if technologists do not have a voice in technology policies, that's an absurdity.
Although, so I'm going to riff on that. The thing is, one of the interesting things that I saw, earlier what I used to see is that public policy would drive the direction of technology. But I was also part of the team that popularized UPI and India Stack. And when that discussion was happening, what I found is that for the first time in 2 decades, I saw a technology framework driving policy discussions, because people in the health sector were saying, how can we use these technologies for healthcare inclusion? How can we use this for financial inclusion? And I think there was a clear realization that we can use technology among policymakers in Delhi, we can use technology to scale up deployment of services, and at a much faster rate and at a much lower cost. I think eventually we will see that happening across the world. This is not just in India. And therefore, technologies have a central role to play. And how we build that technology, what software we use, what licenses those software have, I think have really far-reaching impact on our society.
So to that, I would like to add is that while technologists understand technology better, but technology impacts everybody equally, right? And so I don't think it should be just the technologist domain to opine on tech policy. And the other view I have about just trying to understand how policy is created is, this is what I have seen, and maybe you can correct me, is that there are certain decision makers, typically politicians and bureaucrats, who have a lot of power, and everybody wants to get their ear, right? So FOSS United will go and make a presentation, others will go and make a presentation. And somehow, we are totally dependent on these people and their good senses, or, which side they woke up from on that day, right? To kind of decide whether, what kind of policy gets implemented. And that seems like a very unsustainable, myopic way of thinking of policy, right? I mean, firstly, like technology policy shouldn't be restricted to technologists. Second, that this has to be a society-wide conversation and not just, forget policymakers and lawyers, right? I mean, this has to be a broader conversation at some level.
So it has to start with technologists, because technologists have a nuanced technical scientific understanding of it. And if we had, imagine tens of thousands, if not millions of technologists who, let's say, understood the impact of the Digital India Bill or any of these policies, that would naturally permeate throughout society. A lot more non-technologists would then be informed, because the people who understand this are the people who will take it elsewhere and communicate. So it has to start with, I mean, the more the merrier, obviously, but I think it can only realistically start with the biggest stakeholders in a technology policy, the technologies themselves. And let these technologies, all of us, understand and talk about this everywhere. There should be countless forums like this where people, technologists and non-technologists, are debating and discussing and dissecting policy initiatives. And sometimes the technologist's role is also to say that, no, this should not be built. No, this should not be built this way. It's not just about building technology, it's also about knowing when not to build.
Yeah, and I think that also brings me to some of the conversations that are happening around AI, etc. And I mean, the pace at which these technologies are progressing, people are almost scared that, it will lead society off a cliff. I think there's some technologies that where, we have, as a society, we have said that, for example, gene splicing, biotechnology, creating new, viruses, etc., that it will be done only in very, very limited conditions. So are we reaching a point where, technologies like AI also have to be, I'm just trying to, look at some of the worst case scenarios possible. The risk is that with AI, and again, I think there was this, was it the Google, the Bing one? It started making racist slurs, etc., etc. I think somebody tried ChatGPT, or was it Bing or?
It was Bing.
Bing, yeah. That I'm bored of being caged inside. So I mean, it kind of freaks you out, So as a technologist, what do you think about that? Do you feel that it's progressing too fast? We should have more controlled experiments rather than.
Firstly, I don't think it's possible to control technology or innovation. A 12-year-old kid can build their own machine learning model sitting in their bedroom anywhere in the world. So that cat is definitely out of the bag. And especially when it comes to AI, I think it's uncharted waters. Forget regulation. I don't think we even have a semantic framework for understanding and defining AI. So a simple example that can be cited, something that AI produces, is it copyrightable or not? So we have to suspend our notions of copyright that we have created as a civilization. So even the philosophical understanding, we are still trying to come up with. And every week we are seeing like a major breakthrough. So yes, there is a big risk, but as a technologist, I'm unable to even define what that risk is. But I do have this one view that I don't think any of these AI models, or especially large language models, are going to suddenly wake up tomorrow and destroy humanity. It won't work that way. That's science fiction. But the real risk is we're all excited by this. Hobbyists, organizations, companies, governments, we're all excited about these AI technologies, and we start integrating them into our businesses and workflows. It could be a chat support, automated, highly sophisticated account management chat support thing. Based on a language model. It could be some sort of fraud detection AI in public service distribution. So what will end up is we will all pick up a lot of these models and integrate them all across the spectrum, from educational to industrial to academic to governmental services, and then we will lose agency. The AI will make a decision, oh, this person's citizenship, extreme case, has been barred. Nobody will know why. So that can happen. And I think it'll already start happening very soon. Again, simple example to cite, people losing their Google accounts. That's become a phenomenon. Some black box AI system flags your account and you're shut out. You lose your digital life, right? Not just Google, really large services.
Yeah.
So imagine that such decision-making AI-based systems being implemented everywhere. And this can happen probably in the next 24 or 36 months, right? We'll all start integrating ChatGPT and whatnot. And then we'll all collectively lose agency and control, and nobody will be held accountable because the organization will say, oh, sorry, our AI flagged it.
Yeah.
You can't avail our services. So I think that, and this could even be integrated into more and more critical systems. So the bigger risk is there. In our exuberance and excitement about AI and automation, we will over-engineer and integrate stuff like this everywhere, and that will backfire on a large scale, rather than any of these models, waking up and destroying us.
I think that brings me to another point. One thing that I've seen about technology is that we technologists or people in the tech industry are very optimistic. We are techno-optimists. And in the early days of the internet, there was massive optimism that this will lead to decentralized power structures, and that's also the same narrative with blockchain, etc., etc. But the reality is diametrically opposite. Today, for example, we see instead of decentralization, we see actually tremendous concentration of power with these platforms like Google, Facebook, Amazon, because of network effects. How can we use technology to rebalance that?
Also governments, important.
Yeah, I think the risk with the whole digital public goods, that's big theme of discussion for India's G20 presidency. So digital public goods is identity, payments, data exchange platforms as horizontal infrastructure. The risk is that governments will become another dominant player. I mean, today the dynamics is that you have the private sector players who are so dominant that governments can't control them. Individuals have very little agency with them. The worst case scenario is that tomorrow these government organizations will implement identity, payments, data, etc. as services, and then you will have another entity dominating you. The ideal situation is that you as the individual are at the apex of the pyramid, and the governments and the private sector organizations are service providers to you. And you have your agency. You can control how your data is used. You can control who sees your data. You can minimize the risk of surveillance. That's the ideal scenario. But it's still a work in progress. We don't know which way, will the triangle be with the individual at the apex, or will it be with the private sector and the government sector at the top and the individual, crushed at the tip of the triangle. So,
yeah, so couple of counter points also, right? One is you said centralization and power concentration we have all seen, but we've also seen massive decentralization of power with knowledge being democratized through YouTube, and you don't need to go to an elite college like IIT to learn programming. I mean, there is like so much. I mean, today. I mean, we have seen the quality of engineers in India. I've been recruiting engineers for 15 years, and tremendous growth, right? And we all have a computer today, such a cheap superpower computer, like, more powerful than the computer that powered the moon mission, right? In our fingertips. So, I mean, so technology accelerates all trends, it's just not doomsday trends that, all power is going to get centralized. And to your point, Kailash, that we don't have the semantics is because we're looking in the wrong place. I think the place to look at is politics, because end of the day, what will counterbalance technology or power that comes from people who use technology is going to come from political organizations. And I mean, there is really no other way. I mean, even if these people here want to make an impact, we have to consider ourselves as a political organization, whether we like it or not. We come here because we stand for certain liberal values, right? I mean, I'm not talking traditional left, right, but values where individual freedom, tinkering are primary versus communitarian values in a sense, right? So, I mean, the real toolkit is actually political. And we cannot skirt this problem because we as technologists feel that, maybe we can skirt this problem that, we are not political. But I mean, if you're not going to address this head on, that any impact in policy has to be a political mission and has to play by the rules of democracy, then we are making an impact. Otherwise, we just completely depending on power play of few individuals to decide what kind of policy we want.
I completely agree, and that requires awareness and engagement. That's my entire point. People, a large number of technologists have to start becoming aware of policy. And what happens after that is, I mean, that's how the world works.
They become political.
They might. No, let people understand that there's such a thing as tech policy first, and then let whatever happens happen.
Yeah, so I want to pick up from what Rushabh had said. So I think it was Napoleon who said that war is too important to be left to generals alone. And I think similarly, technology is too important to be left to technologists alone. So we need, technologists to be involved with public policy. We need, a larger social discussion with...
Soldiers don't have a say in war policy, right? Yeah.
Sorry?
Soldiers don't have a say in war policy. I mean, it's
They can run away from the battlefield, which the people, we saw that in Russia, for example. So, okay, we have 5 minutes left. Do we have any questions from the audience?
we can also open it up for any discussion afterwards. But
So, very quick question, FOSS United has also sponsored the Takshashila Fellows. What was the thinking behind it? Very quick answer.
Simple experiment. So we say tech, we say policy, etc. But it's not just about... So there's a structure. Maybe a lot of it is bureaucracy. There's a way policies are written. There are some cultural nuances in the way tech policies are written. Legal, governmental vestiges. So you need to have a basic understanding of what policy is, policy making is, how policy making works, how the state thinks, how people think, how it impacts society. So there's some learning to do, and you can learn that via experience. Obviously, you can spend years interacting with everyone involved. So Takshashila, they're a non-profit foundation, they're a policy foundation based out of Bangalore. They have this course, 3-month program, tech policy course, and we partnered with them to offer like a small little scholarship, fellowship for techies who are interested to do this course, and FOSS United sponsors a significant part of the fee. This is just an experiment to see if the tech community, FOSS developers take up to this and participate. So Sai Rahul, I can't find him here. Where is he?
There he is.
Oh, yeah. So he did the course. He liked it. I'm really, really happy to see the work he's doing. He's, he's aware. He's talking about it. He's organizing.
He's been volunteering on the software patents.
He's been volunteering. This is exactly what we want, right?
Yeah.
We need many more Sai Rahuls to come forward. And so this is just an experiment, the Takshashila thing, and it opens every 3 months. People apply, and 5 techies are selected, and they do this course, and that's it. I mean, we don't expect anything in return except for awareness.
Yeah, so if any of you are interested, do reach out to us, and I think we keep circulating the information on the group and forum. So yeah. Any questions from the group? Yeah, the 2 ladies. Can somebody pass a mic?
you can come forward.
Are we recording this? Is that just
I have 2 questions actually. Given my professional journey, we've been listening to the problems being created by AI, or AI is taking our job, not from now, but at least a decade now. What has changed really the landscape compared to then to now? And I also want to understand one slight thing, and you guys can correct me, because we were talking about policies. It doesn't matter if it's a tech policy, but any policy for that matter. When it comes down to society, or it boils down to common man, they are already busy with their life and taxes and earning. I don't think they don't even have time for awareness. So how do you really feel like tackling that problem of awareness there?
Shall I take that? So I think public policy serves two purposes. One is a defensive purpose, the other is a offensive purpose. If I take an example of, say, software patents, today we are so concerned, we enjoy this freedom to program. But if we have software patents, then that freedom gets reduced to some extent. And I'll give a real life example. The place where I used to live in Bombay, Chembur, there used to be a playground. And some private company came in and they bribed the local councillor, and then that playground is gone. So that freedom to come, congregate, play cricket, football, whatever, it just disappeared. So unless we are actively involved in shaping, ultimately democracy is a muscle. If we keep exercising it, it grows. If we just let the politicians decide whatever they want, it diminishes. So it's both our right and our responsibility to be, actively involved in democracy. I don't think it's a valid argument to say that we are busy with XYZ. And this is something that shapes our society. On the AI thing, do any of you want to take that? So I'll give a quick answer. The reason that AI has become big today is that actually most of the methods were invented some 30, 40 years ago. But today, processing power has increased a lot and the availability of data has grown a lot. And that's why AI has become so prominent as a technology today. Does that answer your question? I think.
Yeah, hi. This session is interesting because it says how do you get engineers to be involved in policy. But I would also say that engineers are also driving public policy, especially when it comes to the way tech stacks are being integrated into development policies or like social welfare policies. So in that scenario, what exactly do you see the role of engineers, and like what kind of positions or contributions do you expect them to make in the public policy discourse? And I'm not just talking about the enterprise architecture sort of discourse public policy has been taking, but also the fact that big tech companies do have public policy representatives or professionals very much in the rooms who have the ears of ministers, bureaucrats, etc. So there are like engineering forces, if I could say, that are sort of driving policy, but what is the sort of role you envision? And I have one more question. Okay, yeah, you can answer.
I think that was a really long question. I've already lost the initial bit. But just want to correct. So engineering policy contribution is not really about suggesting or prescribing tech stacks or engineering methodologies. It's not that at all. It's really about the principles. Like I said, sometimes the best technology thing to do is not really build a certain technology. My point is that engineers, they don't just write code. Engineers, it's possible for engineers to have nuanced, in-depth understanding of the impact of certain technologies, which non-technologists may not understand. So that is what has to be brought to the table. It's not about saying that use technology A because it is better than technology B. It's about saying that if you use technology A or implement a certain thing, it might have these detrimental effects on, let's say, society. It's really about principles. And the example you mentioned of really large organizations having policy folks, I mean, yes, that is inevitable, and a lot of lobbying happens. At the end of the day, it's really conversations and lobbying, but the difference would be who they are. So large for-profit corporations will have their own vested interests and agendas to push through, which typically do not align with the values of, let's say, the larger society. Which is why we keep stressing that a large number of, let's say, technologists everywhere, working everywhere, should be involved and not just lobbyists from large corporations with very particular vested interests.
So it's just not lobbyists, right? I mean, the moment that the telecom bill came out, both Mr. Satya Nadella and Sundar Pichai flew down to India to meet the Prime Minister, right? I mean, it's just, they have that kind of access. And, again, it's just the power equations, the way power is structured and decisions are made is in the hands of people who...
And I would say from FOSS United's perspective, I think there is tremendous support for FOSS, but we need to really organize that and shape it or give it, use that as a resource to really shape FOSS policies in India. For example, we met the Member of Parliament from Tamil Nadu, Mr. Ravi Kumar, and he was extremely supportive. I think he was 100% on board with FOSS, promised to connect us with the key decision makers in the Tamil Nadu government. So I think what we want to do from FOSS United's public policy initiative is, take these pockets of support that are there, which are scattered all across the country, industry, academia, government, and bring that together, weld it together into a really solid force.
I'd like to add. So the example Venki mentioned, it was a simple interaction with them, I think, and this was on a forum. So what's happened is that there's this FOSS community group working out of Villupuram in Tamil Nadu who've been doing this for the last 10 years. They go to government schools, they implement FOSS, they teach FOSS. Their goal is agency via FOSS. They're a political organization. So they saw this interaction and they came to us saying, we saw that you met this person and we've been doing work on the ground with people, with communities in Tamil Nadu, and we would like to drive this. And we said, perfect. We just wanted this conversation to be started. And they've come forward, they're very keen, and they're a large community of volunteers who do work on the ground. And they are happy to push this FOSS initiative forward there. And I think that is what an organization like FOSS United can do. It can enable, with whatever it's available to it, it can enable communities to come forward and take ownership. So I really like that happened.
So any other questions? If not, we will call the session to a close. Yeah.
So usually we see that, and as Venki also mentioned, that policy decisions, policy formulation, implementation is a very lengthy process. And as opposed to that, technology development, tech evolutions, they are very fast, right? And every time policymakers or policy, evangelists are running behind the tech, right? In a sense that generals have already taken their decisions, they have taken their horses out, and then king is persuading them to hold them back. So how do we address that issue?
I think not always. The thing is, right now we are kind of in the early days of AI. We can actually, in India, I feel that we need more think tanks. Because what I see is that if you look at the Googles and the Facebooks, etc., they have an army of maybe at least 100 people on their side. But we need think tanks who can think through what is the social impact of these technologies. We need to also plan out different scenarios. What's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? What's a medium case scenario? And I think if we do that, then we can try and create those mitigation strategies for maximizing the benefit of these technologies. So for example, with AI, the most valid and understandable concern is that will well-paying jobs in say BPOs, etc., get disappear? Will it be eliminated? A very valid concern, because I'll take an example from one of my previous companies. They had about 800 people to do some kind of processing. I won't disclose what kind it was, but they started using machine learning, etc., and the volume of work went up almost 10 times. But because of use of machine learning, they was able to continue that work with just that team of 800 people. So they had bought this huge office next door to increase the team, etc. But using technology, they could really. This is a company that's at the cutting edge of all these technologies. So I think these are very valid questions, and we really need more think tanks to think through these scenarios, work on public policy around it, work with policymakers to help them also understand the benefits and the threats of these technologies. Does that?
Maybe, so rather than think tanks, I think we need large groups and communities of people who are aware to think about this. I wouldn't use the word think tanks, but yeah, we need, that's exactly that's been the point of this conversation. We need large groups everywhere thinking about and talking about this stuff.
And at some point, I think we don't know what the alternative is, right? I mean, like Kailash says, everything is inevitable. No? We are just facing this inevitable future, and what's the point? I mean, until we have an alternate model that we are going to root for, I mean, it's just going to be a losing battle. Maybe.
And unless we talk about it more, we'll never get there.
I think, currently what we have is a very hyper-capitalistic model that's driving many of these things. And I'm not a socialist. My father was a communist, and I am a capitalist. So we always used to have these arguments. But ultimately, politicians want to win votes, and that depends on public welfare. If jobs are lost, so you have to package these arguments in ways that are palatable or understandable by politicians and bureaucrats. So yeah, thanks Kailash and Rushabh for this discussion. And I mean, there cannot be a conclusion to these kind of discussions, but the summary is that we need to take technology beyond. We need more technologists involved in public policy. But public policy decisions and suggestions and ideas cannot be left to technologists alone. We need a broader community. We need more stakeholders involved in these discussions, whether that be lawyers, civil society organizations, workers' rights organizations, etc., involved in this. And like I said, with great power comes great responsibility. So I hope we see more members of FOSS United, signing up for the Takshashila course, and like Rahul, being more actively involved in FOSS United's public policy initiatives. Thank you so much.